Welcome to another episode of the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. This week, I drive a new little car and a car that's completely new to us. Kyle goes away to drive a fancy new EV, and then he sits down and talks to them about it after. We'll get to all that and a pretty cool question of the week, but first, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, so we'll start things off with a first drive that I did, feels like yesterday because it kind of was just a couple days ago. But I went down to the Detroit area to drive the new Nissan Kicks. So it's new. Like, it's not one of those, hey, this is new, and they like put on, some new headlights or just slightly massage existing vehicle. This is an entire new platform for North America. It's currently used in Europe by Nissan and Renault. The Kicks has grown in size in pretty much every possible dimension. And the big news is it finally can have all-wheel drive. Yay. Yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah, go on.
Oh, no, I mean, like, as a fan of the tracks, I liked that the Kicks was front drive only, but I realized that without the Rogue Sport, Nissan needed something to fight the cross-track class. So I get it.
That's the thing. This isn't there either. It's the best thing I can compare it to is the Trailblazer. It's not quite the size of the Crosstrek or the power really fighting for that. Nissan themselves say its competitors are the Kona, which is like a very they line up pretty well.
Okay.
The Soul and the Trax, because although there's optional all-wheel drive, you can get front-wheel drive in all three trims. So you can get a fully loaded every option version with front, or you can get an absolute base model with all-wheel drive. So they're kind of doing what Chevy did, but instead of calling it two different cars, they're giving you the Trax and the Trailblazer in one package.
Okay.
The new chassis is good. Like, it's not as good as, say, the Prius, but it's very similar in what they've done to improve it. The little thin-rimmed, small steering wheel, it's way more agile feeling. Body roll's better controlled. I mean, it's a stiffer chassis. Ride comfort's really good. You hear the suspension hitting things, but you don't feel it. And as I said in my video, my review, if I have to choose between hearing and not feeling, or feeling and not hearing, I'll definitely take the noise than the bumps. So, and they did say they did a lot of sound deadening, but the engine makes a lot of noise and you hear road noise, but it's also the nature of the class. The Kicks has a new engine. It's a 2-liter, 141 horsepower, 140 pound-feet of torque. So that's a good increase on the old 1.6. It was like 122, and I think 115 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's 300 pounds heavier, and I would say it's no slower and no faster. It's still, to get to highway speeds, you plant your foot and make some noise and you leisurely get up there.
So it's like the Honda HR-V, one of our absolute favorite cars in the class.
It is in the sense of the drivetrain, yes, very much so. But I think it's better in some other ways, and obviously worse in some other ways. But it's also not really in that class. I talked to them, like, it'd be cool if they put like the Rogue engine in and made like for the SR, made a real like performance sportier version, and then it could like probably compete against the Crosstreks and stuff. But as it stands, it's kind of like I really think it's a non-turbo CX-30 competitor. Like I said, the Trailblazer, the Kona, I could see, although the Kona kind of grew, but it's the one thing I can definitely say, and I put in both video and article, is it is a far better entry-level SUV for Nissan. Like, there's no question. It's a step up. So I mean, it's one of those things that I really want to now get it and compare. I want a front drive to compare to the Trax, and I want an all-wheel to compare to like the CX-30 or the Kona. But,
yeah, I'm very curious about it. I saw it when it debuted in New York, and it is funky. There's a lot of cool colors and trim options. And I think Nissan found a good little groove there with the first kicks on making it a really appealing package. Just like you said, it was missing some things that the market demands. So yeah,
Like
curious to get our hands on it and do a comparison.
yeah, and like the body cladding on the middle and top trim resemble the bottom of a sneaker, a high-end sneaker, because it's called the kicks. Like, yeah, it's not me making the puns. Anyway, moving on to a different kind of SUV in a different part of the United States that you drove.
Yes, I went to a very pretty Wyoming, and actually, we popped into Idaho for lunch to drive the 2025 Polestar 3. Now, it's the brand's third model because it's right there in the name, but it is the first SUV. And okay, so largely it's good.
So before you go on, my mind completely wandered how it's the Polestar 3 because it's the third model, and I started to think, can you imagine if like Ford or Chevy did that? The Ford 734.
Well, yeah, we joked about that on the trip where it's like, imagine telling your grandkids when they're like, oh, I'm getting a new Polestar 34, and you're like, I remember when Polestar was single digits. Yeah, it's okay, Grandpa. It looks very good. I should start with that. It looks great. The little Aero integrated front spoiler between the headlights, like that's empty space. Like if you look from the windshield down, you can see through. The taper is very unique. It looks like it shouldn't be that spacious, but of course the taper happens after the rear passenger's head, so it's actually fine. I had plenty of space in the second row, and it looks really good, and it looks sporty without being aggressive, if that makes sense, because it doesn't look particularly angry. So it drives really well. It's an EV, just like all Polestars outside of that initial limited edition model. And it shares a platform with the EX90 that I drove recently, except it does feel different to drive. It's a little more eager. Polestar kept making the comparison, not the comparison, but they kept name dropping Porsche and BMW. And I can see it. I mean, I haven't driven the Macan EV yet, but I get that same sense of putting the driver first. And despite saying that, it doesn't punish you with a rough ride. It's actually pretty good. Yeah, and the stats are great. Yeah, it's a little under 500 horsepower to start and a little over 300 miles of range. If you get the performance pack, then those numbers go up and down, as you'd expect. But the problems that I have with it are largely the same that I had with the Volvo, which centers all around the infotainment. There's too many controls that are forced into the touchscreen, and so you have to dig through the touchscreen to use them. The best example is the massage seats. You have to do 4 different taps to actually activate the massaging.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you'd get used to if you owned it, just like Tesla.
Sure.
Like if someone gets in a Tesla that's never driven one, it's a nightmare to operate. But people who own them are like, oh, it's the smartest thing ever. You're just used to it. Like you learn what you have. I mean, totally off topic, but a vehicle I'm driving today, I figured out today after about 500 or 600 miles how I could change the source on the go for the audio, because like there was nothing that made sense, and if it got stuck on my phone I couldn't get it off, and it wouldn't let me change it because I was in motion. So anyway, that's a different rant for a different time.
No, but you make a good point, and I think this does a lot of the similar things where Polestar has a new infotainment system, and largely it's easy to learn, which I think is kind of the case for Teslas too. Whenever I've been in them, it's a little overwhelming at first, but it's easy to learn. But the problem again is that there's just too many things that you have to use in the touchscreen that I don't have options for. Another annoying thing is the seat adjustments. It's really clever. It's a little cube on the side of the seat that you rotate or nudge up, down, fore and aft. And then there's a button in the middle that changes the different things that you're adjusting. So the first setting is, like moving the seat and the typical things. But then if you press the button, then you can adjust the lumbar. If you press the button again, then you can adjust the bolsters. It's a pretty easy way to keep physical controls down while still making it pretty intuitive. But that's also the way to get to the massage functions. And I found the seat adjustments show up on the main touchscreen, but sometimes there's a delay with you pressing the button and moving to the next thing. So it's just stuff like that. And then there's, of course, the things that are waiting to be added to the car
Yeah.
still, like gap adjustment for adaptive cruise. And there's no way to control your audio in any way on the steering wheel. There's buttons, but they don't do anything yet.
Interesting. So two
Yeah.
things. One, what you're talking about, the seat. That's something that I'm starting to appreciate too. Is I think we got a touchscreen everything because it's tech cool is dying off. People don't want it, and besides the influencers, no, I don't mean like TikTok influencers. I mean the people in the tech that influenced the decision to do this thought it was the greatest thing ever. We're seeing buttons come back, and I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla one day is going to put extra buttons on, and then everyone will think it's the greatest thing ever. And it's like you just made your radio how it used to be. But
Yeah.
the things that I see as the future is what you described, because Jag, Land Rover, Range Rover, they have similar button for their climate control. You have the two dials, and you push in for seat, you spin it where it is for temperature, and you pull out for fan. And I was like, there's like three controls, one thing. It's like a touch screen, but it's not. Yeah, like things like that. They just make sense. So,
Yeah.
and also,
I love that setup in the JLRs.
Yeah. Also, I'm glad you mentioned the size and the competitors, because with Rivian and Polestar and everybody naming things after numbers, it's like, well, what size is this car? Like, is it a compact SUV or is it a big 3-row? Like, so
Yeah,
that's good to get some relation, because pictures never can tell.
no, and so it's like roughly, like it's a little bit bigger than the Macan EV, but it's Audi Q6 or BMW iX ish sized.
Okay.
Yeah. But overall, I think it's good. It needs some updates.
All right, well, moving on, because we got lots to talk about. We're on to a different kind of EV, also from overseas. This is the VinFast VF8. So this is something I wanted to drive for quite a while, because it's a new manufacturer in North America, and more or less it's a new manufacturer, period. They only have a couple of years making gas cars in their home market, and then they suddenly switch to EVs and they're taking on the world, which is, I give them props for the ambition. Yeah. And anyone who's listening to this probably is somewhat into cars, and they may have read the stories of the first prototypes driven about this time last year, and it sounded pretty terrible. So when it was offered for the driver, really wanted to drive it, and I had to sit down with one of the top product guys, and it's crazy what they changed since the prototype. Like, we're not talking things here and there. Like, they changed the motor regulators for the windows so they'd go up and down faster and smoother. They changed, obviously, the software of the infotainment system and the actual screen itself, sensitivity, just like everything basically got updated. So I drove it for a week, the video and article live, and basically it's, compared to what I heard, it is much improved, but it's still not quite there. This is a first attempt from a new manufacturer, and I say in the video and the article, think of the first Hyundais that came to our shores, or even the Kia Rio from 01 compared to where they are now. Like, if they have the money and the ambition, I can't wait for the next products. But this one, as it stands, we're just talking about infotainment, so it's a perfect lead-in. It's got the same thing, massive screen. All the buttons are controlled on the steering wheel. And so how Tesla has the two spinning wheels and the side-to-side for each thumb, they have one D-pad for your left thumb. Like, like an old Sega, how it kind of had like the 8 things, like up, down, side, in the corners, and then a button in the middle. And on the infotainment screen on the left-hand side, even if you're in Apple CarPlay, there's always a picture of the VF8, and I think it's 5 main menus, and you can touch them with your finger, and then that button controls them. And it's very easy. It's quick. It's pretty intuitive. They've obviously copied the Tesla model, but I think they've improved on it in that sense. There's other menus or screens that are just missing, like just some things you're used to seeing with like energy consumption and just little things. But yeah, like the tech is really good, and the motors are really good. So it's a dual motor no matter what, which a lot of competitors don't do. They have a 2-wheel drive of some kind. There's a small power, which is like 350 or something, and then there's the 402 horsepower dual motor, which I got, and that's more powerful than most of the competitors in the class. And they're like, it's hard to kind of mess up a motor, but it's responsive and fast and exactly what it's supposed to do. Its closest competitors are the Mustang Mach-E long range all-wheel drive, the Aria. I can't remember. They have confusing names to me, but the second from the top, the Evolve Plus, I think.
Oh yeah, I don't know the Nissan names.
And the ID4 Pro all-wheel drive, not the Plus, but the Pro. So feature wise, power wise, battery size wise, because this is an 87.7 kilowatt hour battery pack, they're all there. It's even priced the same. And that's sort of I get like you need to make money off the car, but I think they should have come in quite a bit lower to get people into the brand. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, like so far all good. The two areas that need a lot of improvement are, well, it's really just one area. It's the chassis, like the actual bones of the vehicle. I don't know what it's from, if it's like an in-house design they just made all new, or one that was from a previous model that they've carried over. But for its size, it is ridiculously heavy. It's like 5,700 pounds, and it's going up against the vehicles I mentioned, and they're all about 48 to 4,900 pounds. I mean, they're all heavy because they're EVs, but that's about a 700-pound increase. So
Yeah.
even though it has the 400 horsepower, which I'm sure it does, people said it didn't feel like 400 horsepower. It does feel like 400 horsepower. It's just it's pulling 5,700 pounds. It's like the Ranger Raptor, very similar power to weight ratio, and that's sort of how it accelerates.
Hmm.
And the other downside is its range trails the competition too. I think it's 249 miles, and most of the competition's in the 260 to almost 300-mile range with that
Hmm.
price and battery pack. So it's not this like it's not even close to being a terrible vehicle that it sounds like the prototypes were. Like they have worked on it, but it's just not there to be fully competitive. I mean, the big thing is it's got good tech, and then obviously it's got a ridiculous warranty. So
Yeah.
10-year, 200,000 kilometers, 120,000 miles, and 10-year unlimited on the battery. So yeah, like that's going to get people in. But like I said, this is the first attempt, and then the VF9's coming, and then the 5 and 6, and I'm really curious to see the progression. And even if those aren't much better, this is all first gen. Like what'll really tell the company is in 5 years or 6 years or whatever when they bring the second gen. But
Yeah. Yeah. The tough thing is, I mean, I'm just gonna address the elephant in the room here. I think Fisker had a pretty good warranty too, and
yeah, now in fairness to VinFast to Fisker, they have way more backing. Like Fisker is
yeah,
constantly like
it's true.
they're the Vin. What are they called? Vin something.
Conglomerate.
Yeah, they have a name, and I know it is bugging me. I can't remember it, but they own like half of the country. It seems like they have their own universities and stuff. Like they're fine there, and they have a more ambitious plan, and they're hiring people. And like Fisker was a very sort of like Rivian and Lucid, like a high end sort of boutique EV maker,
Yeah.
whereas they've already got like 4 or 5 models for sale in their home market, and these are coming to Europe and stuff. So yeah, I'm curious to see how things go. I mean, this body got a lot more praise than not for styling. I mean, I'm not sold on the V across the front, but if I look at the VF9, the 3-row that's coming next, it looks fantastic. So
Yeah, and the 7 or the 6 also looks really good. I think they found a really good design language that works for them. And I mean, in North America, they don't have to worry about Renault or the
yeah,
newest Alphas that have a similar vibe. So I think it's good. And I think to your point, you just mentioned earlier that Lucid and Rivian came in, and Tesla, when Tesla started, like they came in as premium products with price tags to match, right? Like VinFast is coming in with no previous models and targeting the most competitive part of the EV market. And so they have
yeah.
to, you can't really come in at much of a discount or else you're not making money, and you can't price it higher either. So there is a big challenge facing the brand. And I mean, I hope it does well, but like even if it's a first generation of models, they need people to buy them first to get to the next generation.
Well, uh, I think to your exact point, their other models can't come soon enough because this
Mhm.
is the hottest, craziest market in EV. Like every manufacturer, it seems, except for maybe Chrysler, has an EV in the space now.
Mhm.
But the VF9, it's got the Kia EV9 and the future Hyundai, and not much else. So
Mhm.
like there's a lot less there. And then like the 5 and 6 are smaller, like two classes smaller, and there isn't really many NEVs, especially mainstream, in that category at all. So yeah, like I think the sooner they can get in, they can establish themselves in these other markets. So yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's just taking up a lot of time. So let's move on. On to something completely different. You and I got to drive two rad convertibles
Heck
from the
yeah.
90s. And the premise of this was not just because we wanted to drive really cool old cars. That's not it at all. That's totally it. But
Pretty much.
yeah, it was just basically see and reaffirm in our minds how cool little sporty cars were in the 90s, and why we had so many convertibles back then, because like everything was convertible. And I mean, you can talk about the Porsche in a second, but I had a 90 Miata, which is like the car. I think it's partially responsible for the convertible craze because it was so different and popular when it came out.
Hmm.
But it's like you get in these cars and it's just, especially the Miata, it's you in a car. There's no safety systems, there's no airbags, no ABS, no traction control, none of that in the first year. There's manual everything. It's just a 5-speed, a steering wheel, and pedals. And I mean, it's a Miata, so it's not cliche. Like it feels like you're wearing it when you drive it, and it's just a blast to rip around. I mean, is it safe by today's standards? Not at all. But I wouldn't want to flip one of those or anything.
No.
But yeah, it was just a blast to drive.
Yeah, and the 968 is kind of the same and kind of different. I mean, it's much bigger, it's much heavier, but it's the last evolution of Porsche's front engine rear drive models, the transaxle cars. And in that way, it has the similar balance to the Miata, right? It's just quicker and more powerful. It has a not entirely refined 3-liter inline four, but it's 237 horsepower when it was new. And so it's, and like a lot of torque because it's enormous. So it's still pretty quick by modern standards, like
Oh yeah,
Subaru quick-ish. The 6-speed is awesome. The steering is great, but it, you know, you can tell the chassis isn't the stiffest thing out there when you're going over bumps. But it's just fun, like you said. It's just good to cruise around in, and it works better as a Grand Tourer than the Miata ever would. You've got leather and
I got
pretty decent sound system and power things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was good, and because it's such a rare vehicle, in North America, Porsche only sold something like 12,000 in the 4 years that this was around. Meanwhile, there were over 100,000 944s sold over its lifetime. So this is a relative rarity. And so I got a lot of questions. I've had people ask me, "Oh, is this a new car?" Like it's weird because its styling doesn't really place it anywhere except for the small wheels, right? That's the giveaway. So it was fun, and I think what you said earlier is back then you had to focus more on driving because we just didn't have a lot else in cars. And so I think people flocked towards convertibles more then because you're already focused more on the drive anyway. You might as well enjoy the added sensory experience of a convertible.
And MVH wasn't much of anything, so it's already making a bunch of noise and crude. Might as well take the top off.
Yeah.
But to your point, yeah, you want a convertible GR86 or BRZ, just go buy a 968.
Yeah,
it's because years old, but
because it's the same price as those, which is a tough sell. As much as I liked it, I would buy 2 Boxsters, which is what you can do instead of one 968.
Well, I think that was his problem to begin with, is in the 90s, it was so much money for what you got. And I remember being a teenager back then, I wrote it off too, because I was like, 4-cylinder. Yeah, it's a 3-liter, but like 237, like Corvettes are making 300 now, and 911s are making this. And I mean, they were more money, but you just discounted that. And then I drove it on this comparison feature, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, oh, this is way more powerful and fun than you think. And that's sort of part of the problem, was I think there's probably a lot of people who thought my way. And then also in the 90s, you had like the Corvette and the Viper and a whole influx of Japanese sports cars. So suddenly it wasn't a standalone like the 944 enjoyed for many years.
It's true.
All right, so a couple quick news hits before you get on. So first off, Mercedes is killing its SUV coupes. Yay. Good. Everyone else follow suit, please. BMW, Audi, everyone, listen up. Get rid of your coupes, please. They're not.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add. Just good.
They're compromised. Now, if Mercedes started making all their SUVs with that roof line, I'd be like, okay, but we've driven the EQ series, and no. It's like touchscreens. It's going to go in a fad, and we're just going to go back to what we used to have.
Well, and like I don't like the Mercedes ones, but I will admit that the X4 drives well, and yeah. But anyway,
and the latest X6 looks pretty nice too. But anyway, on to other quick updates. Toyota's dropping the name Prime, which I get. We talked about this earlier. I think it's people don't know what Prime is, like general consumers. And let's face it, those are the people buying Prius Primes and RAV4 Primes. It's not the enthusiasts, unless they're buying it for like their daily. So people now know what a plug-in or PHEV or hybrid is. So I think you need that badge. And I know the RAV4 had it, but I think you need it bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I'll repeat what we talked about the first time that I learned about this is it's SEO for car names now. Prime, I thought was a really good name, but I understand that it doesn't tell you what the car is. So PHEV, whatever you want to call it, it does make more sense, except I still think there's a knowledge gap where people don't entirely understand the difference between regular hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and whatever the heck the Ram Charger is. So
you say SEO for cars, but that's always been the case. I mean, in the 90s, you slapped ABS on the back of your car, fuel injection, or anything.
It's true.
The track. I mean, I remember Mercedes first had the stability thing on the back. You're like, whoa, the thing's got stability control.
Yep.
As I said, you just need a bigger hybrid sticker. I mean, maybe not Chevrolet Yukon hybrid, but it's somewhere between. All right, last story. W1. What does that sound like to our people who aren't reading this? Nothing. It sounds like it reminds me of what is the old TV show W5 or something?
Yeah. So McLaren is going to name its next hypercar W1. I get from a naming perspective, there was F1, there was P1, now there's W1. It continues a lineage. It excludes the other like Sabre or whatever it had for the last few years. That's great, but can we all just agree that W is probably one of the least sporty letters in the alphabet?
Well, it reminds me, I mean, it's not the same letters, but like the Volkswagen, what was the XL one? Like,
I always wanted to drive one.
So if you read the article that Michael wrote, it's hilarious because the W stands for like World Championship because it's 50 years since they won. And I'm like, that's like, oh, that's totally what I thought it stood for. And if that's true, why isn't it W50? I guess it's starting to sound like oil or
was that was 50 years ago was their first world championship though, right?
Yeah.
Is that
okay? And that's what they're celebrating. But W50, then you're just like thinking it's some sort of lubricant. So I get that. But I mean, P1 probably didn't sound like anything until we saw the car. So once you see the car and you associate it, we'll be all cool.
But P1 had like a pretty quick association of like, oh, you qualified first. Like P1 I could understand. Like W1, all right.
Winner one.
Winner one.
Anyway, forget the name. I'm just really looking forward to what it is because if there's one company that does ridiculous low volume hypercars, well, it's McLaren. I mean, the F1, the P1, like those are two of the most ridiculous cars of their time, if not ever. So I have high hopes for them. They expect big things.
And it's the only company that doesn't make an SUV. Keep doing your thing.
Great. Now they're going to make an SUV, Kyle. Good job. That's what this is.
W's for, can you imagine?
Wide. Stands for wide. All right. So we're going to take a very quick break and we'll come back. We'll have the question of the week. And then Kyle is going to talk to Polestar and I'll be back with Colin for F1 and we'll talk about what's ahead. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With the parts you need at the prices you want and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, they're guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. So this week's question of the week comes from Kyle, and he said, because we've been talking about it quite a bit this week, what vehicle needs a PHEV option or just a badge on the back? It's your question, so I'm sure you have some. I should have thought of this before, but you go ahead.
I have so many. I think, well, look, I've done this for the last few questions of the week. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to go with a Toyota one first because
of course
it's easy. It's right there. I guess they're not going to call it this anymore based on this week's news, but Tacoma Prime.
It sounds like a Transformer.
Right, it does. I would follow Tacoma Prime into battle.
Either that or it's like some action hero in a movie.
Yeah, I could see that. It's like a Netflix special. It's that sort of thing. Maybe it's Ryan Reynolds. He's some bounty hunter. I don't know. Anyway, I think a plug-in hybrid mid-size pickup is the next thing, right, that we need because we love the Maverick. It's a hybrid. It's a small pickup. The Toyota
that was hybrid. You just stole my answer.
Oh no! I'm just gonna pass it off to Mike. Awesome. Mike, what's your choice? What's your first suggestion?
Maverick plug-in.
Yeah,
I mean, So it was hybrid, was front wheel drive only. So it made way more sense before because the Escape plug-in was front wheel drive only. So it seemed like it would be easy enough to slot in. Now that it's all wheel drive, I'm sure you can make the plug-in all wheel drive, and then you get to go in the HOV lanes and get discounts from governments, and it makes it even more appealing. It's
And if I
yeah,
remember right, I could be wrong here because but the Lincoln equivalent of the Escape had a plug-in hybrid option as well shortly.
mhm.
And I'm pretty sure it was all-wheel drive. So I think the
Yeah.
plug-in can be paired with all-wheel drive. It's just it wasn't on the Ford side. But now that there's an Maverick all-wheel drive, yeah.
Well, since you stole that one, I'm gonna give a real one. That'll be another quickie, and it's top of mind because I've literally been writing the article and editing the video today. The Chevrolet E-Ray. It should be able to plug in and charge up that battery.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even give it a slightly larger one. I guess you don't want too
Where do
much
you
more
fit
weight,
it
but
though?
you can charge it while you drive, and it never really runs out because it's just always charging it. But
Yeah.
um, if you're driving hard and then you want to use the stealth mode and it was depleted, that would kind of suck. I mean, it only goes 3-4 miles, but if it's a plug-in, then again, you get to drive in HOV lanes and get government discounts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
All
Should
right.
I do a second one, or are we good on
Sure.
this?
No, you can do another one.
All right. So I think the other one that would make a lot of sense is the Subaru Outback.
Well, they've done it with the Crosstrek, and that didn't go over too well, but
Didn't.
it was also not a great plug-in. But yeah, the Outback could totally work. I was thinking along those lines of like just a good every person family car
Mm-hmm.
that you could just like give it like even 30 miles of range, do your daily errands, pick the kids up, drop them off, plug it in at night again, and then when you need to go to the hiking or canoeing or whatever Subaru people do in the commercials, you've got the gas engine, you're off, good to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think that's where it makes the most sense is everyday family vehicles. Like, I know I already said the Tacoma, but honestly, pretty much anything in Toyota's lineup, like the Sienna, would make a ton of sense. But I'm guessing Toyota limits PHEV implementation because you have to create a much larger battery. So that is probably the limiting factor as to why we don't see more. But yeah, those are good answers.
I mean, the Accord and Camry would have both made perfect sense, but we all know where that segment's going, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's why you have CRV hybrid and the two versions of the RAV4. But I do think, though, this is going to be more and more popular, as everyone's saying, as EVs aren't selling because it's just not quite there with infrastructure and technology. This is the next best thing. And if you make these, if you use like sort of more of a Chevy Volt, where it's sort of an EV first with the gas second, you can get decent range out of them. I think it'd make a lot of sense, but we'll see. Anyway, we will wrap this up and take a longer break. This is the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. We'll take a couple minutes here, and then Kyle will be back to talk all things Polestar 3. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Okay, everyone, let's take a minute and talk about the one that got away. The vehicle you once owned and for whatever reason had to get rid of, and to this day fully regret ever doing so. For me, it's my Subaru SVX. It was a 1997 model, which was one of the last years it was ever sold here. It was black on the outside and it had the beige leather and suede interior. It was in amazing condition for its age because it was just a one-owner vehicle. The interior was near flawless. The paint was pretty good considering it was about a 20-year-old car when I got it. I just loved everything about it. I loved the quirkiness because I love oddball cars. I love the window within the window, the power button on the gear shifter, the way the dash was laid out and you could hide the radio behind the fake wood panel. The flat six was just so smooth and it was all-wheel drive, and although it wasn't overly quick, it still had enough power. The problem was, within a year of buying that car, I ended up selling it because I got a great deal on another vehicle. And to this day, I regret doing so. Part of the reason I sold it was, although it was in great shape, it wasn't perfect and there were things that needed to be fixed, like the air conditioner, reservoir, some bearings, and other bits. And back then there was no eBay guaranteed fit program, so finding parts for such a rare 20-year-old car was not easy. Luckily, I sold it to someone who not only cared for it, but took the time to fix it up. And every once in a while, I do get to still see it, and I still regret ever getting rid of it. I am constantly online looking for a new SVX because now I have a system that I can find parts for it, but I haven't come across one that's both in the right condition and the right price range. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are here just in the little bit of Idaho, actually, not in Wyoming. But we're here for the first drive of the Polestar 3, and I have a special guest who will introduce himself.
My name is Christian Samson. I work at Polestar development, product development. I'm responsible for product attributes and the product identity of the car character.
And that's a really interesting place that I'd like to start talking with you, Christian, because you talked in your presentation this morning about approaching new segments for Polestar, with this being your first SUV, about what you can add to the segment. So can you just expand on that line of thinking?
I think the Polestar approach in the segment is the performance part of it, the driver's car, but mixed with the modernity and the contemporary technology and the ease of use, the environmentally friendly approach of a BEV car. So that intersection between traditional, nice, good performance feel of a car and the modern life of a contemporary.
And you say traditional because you are a petrol head. We're good.
I needed to rephrase that, didn't I?
Yeah, no, it's fine. We understand the appeal. But yeah, no, okay, so that's the main thinking behind this.
So yeah, it is, and I think there is a customer base looking for that kind of car. Very sleek silhouette, very sporty looking, hugging the wheels, and not only the traditional SUV hallmarks, but actually having some freshness into the segment. That's what we hope to add.
Okay, well, that's a great way to lead into the next question that I had for you, which is, what are some of the challenges that you see these opposing approaches really of designing an SUV and the typical ideas of what an SUV means, but also the sleekness and the aero efficiency required of an EV?
Yeah, to match them, you mean?
How do you combine those two?
So in this case, we have tried some innovative solutions with aerodynamics
Mm-hmm.
to have a fairly high front end, a grille area, but with the wing allow an efficient dealing with the air hitting the car from the front end. We also have a rear end spoiler. We have some air separation detail at the rear. But most of it, we are of course working with technology in the car to have the efficiency we want.
Mm-hmm. And in the presentation you talked about, we'll never see a Polestar with an 150 kilowatt or a 200 kilowatt battery. So how can you maybe expand on that a little bit and the idea of range anxiety?
I think the range we currently have with a modern electric car is on the, we're past that range anxiety point, and I think as charging infrastructure improves, fast charging becomes more of an issue,
Mm-hmm.
and availability and availability fast chargers where you happen to stop, not having to plan your route according to charging stop, but actually stop where you like to stop and find convenience in charging there.
Mm-hmm. And so you don't see a future where we're going to need to keep making bigger and bigger batteries, right?
I don't think so. We don't think so. It doesn't really make sense to add for that once every second year journey that you do not have to stop and you can drive for 10 hours continuously. I don't think there is a big demand for that.
I appreciate that. I'm aligned with you on that one.
Yeah.
In terms of demand, you mentioned the demand. The interior of this is very modern, very minimalist, very nice. We see such a focus on carbon footprint from Polestar, not just with the cradle to gate term, as you said in your presentation, but also with the leather and it being sustainably sourced. So I understand that that's a big deal for Polestar, and you make that a very core tenet of the production. But how are you seeing that from the customer side in terms of sustainability?
I think it's a big deal for everyone. And I think we are simply just ahead of the policymakers and the regulations. This is the future. The future, others will come to the position where we are. We are the forerunners. And that's a pretty good position to be in, not being pushed by regulations, but actually running ahead of the league. So to us, it makes perfect sense to be in that position.
Okay, so the racing roots of Polestar have just applied to a different idea. Then you want to be ahead of everyone.
It's still performance, isn't it?
Yeah, interesting.
Being ahead of the game is still performance.
One thing I wanted to ask you more details on, because you mentioned it, we all had a good chuckle in the presentation. Stupid systems. Can you explain that idea for our listeners?
So I think I was ranting about the things like support system, driver support system. That's what you mean. I think with increased technology level in the car, sensors detecting if and where your hands are positioned at the steering wheel, the monitoring eye tracking, we try to understand how fatigue, how tired you are, how drowsiness, all that information, and still we act as the driver is really not paying attention. So I think some kind of dynamics there is needed, some kind of smartness. If I do reach over to my child or to reach my phone or a water bottle or whatever, and I'm not paying attention, yes, let the lane keeping aid or driver support system engage and intervene. That's very nice. No one wants to crash. But if I am focused on what I'm doing and I'm doing it right, why should the system tell? Drivers should have authority when the car judges the car that the driver is paying attention and active.
Yeah, and
so that respecting that driver authority of the driver is responsible, not the car.
Yeah, and you use the example of an object being in the middle of the road, and that's something that we're seeing out in the country and the mountains. So yeah, that's okay. Thank you for expanding on that.
Okay.
One final question for you, because of course I have to ask. We're driving a new vehicle. What does Polestar see as the natural competitors for something like the 3?
Natural competitors. We hope to add something to the segment. So there could be a customer audience from many areas. We like performance cars, so the more performance-minded cars are what we consider. The Porsches, they're very nice. We like Porsches. We hope the Porsche drivers will like our cars. Who knows? So it's a wide span, of course.
Yes,
it's a wide span.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Christian. I think it's about time that I'm going to get back in and drive your car.
Enjoy.
So thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're here for another Formula One news and rumors segment with Colin Wood. What do you have for us this week?
Hey, Mike, I have the worst news in Formula One history. Well, maybe that's overselling it a bit, but oh man, Daniel Ricciardo's done. Isn't that it? Like I'm smiling, but maybe that's just because he puts a smile on my face. So sad news. I mean, I can't say it's wasn't a long time coming, I guess, but I feel like the sport will definitely miss this guy. So,
yeah, I mean, it's the second time he's left, right? Maybe he'll come back for a third time, like Jordan.
Yeah. I mean, he's been around. I mean, so many great memories, right? Like he was. I don't know. Maybe first of all, like, did he deserve it? Like, I think he was given every opportunity, right? Like to come back and kick butt and come back to the big team. But I do think the reality is, I mean, he wasn't impressing the hell of anybody at RB, and the whole point of that team is it's supposed to be a feeder team. So I feel like if you're not moving up, you're you're going way back. You're going somewhere else, right? It's time to
especially
move
with his
somebody in.
age, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
this tiny window because you're only getting so much out of him. So yeah, it was like didn't work and off he went.
Yeah, and you never know. Maybe if they had stuck him right in the Red Bull from the start of the year, he could have been doing a whole lot better. I don't know.
Yeah. I think he left Red Bull the first time sort of at his prime because he thought he was worth more because he knew he was going to be second driver to Verstappen.
He did.
And he picked the wrong team. In fairness, he didn't know it was going to be that bad at that time, but like wrong team, wrong time. That was like Renault's huge downswing. And then he went to McLaren too early. And then now he's just too old. Like he kind of wasted those years. And if he'd stuck at Red Bull the whole time, yes, he would have always been number 2 to Verstappen, but he probably, at least early on, would have done better than Perez.
Yeah.
Like he would have had some constructor championships and some wins, some more wins here and there. So
yeah,
I mean, he chose his path and he seems to have enjoyed it.
And apparently, he got paid a pile of money by McLaren to even leave, right? So he's not hurting, and I'm sure he's a marketable individual. I'm sure he'll have no problems making money in the future, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I was thinking about like all the great things he led to the sport. Like if you think about it, that's actually the very first Drive to Survive episode is really all about him, and that's how much of a personality he is, right? And that all got going with him, and like there's like all of his like funny sayings, and he was just a goof, and all the holy mac and cheese balls, and like it didn't matter what was going on, he was playing tricks. Maybe he didn't take it seriously enough, I don't know, but he just the shoey, like everything is great. Like he really was a tremendously entertaining driver, and I even think way back to, and maybe I'm overstepping it, but when he first came on the scene, he really challenged Vettel at Red Bull, and he was, early Ricardo was a pretty amazing force. So
it's interesting you bring up Drive to Survive because would that show have been as successful if he just decided to stay at Red Bull and they didn't get to follow him for many years? I mean, it wasn't just him. Like Gunther was a big part of it too, but there's going to be an entire episode next season dedicated to him leaving, and maybe he'll be a guest commentator there like how Gunther was last year.
Yeah, I totally think that would be excellent. How could they not? And they really did. Apparently, I can't remember where it was. I watched something where they talked about how this whole idea of the Drive to Survive thing and how it evolved is that they had Ricardo as like the star from the start, but there was no early intention to go and like really like live these people's lives and visit them at their homes and do all this stuff. But apparently either they suggested and he agreed, or he actually suggested it to them, and that's why they came out to his like parents' farm or whatever it was, and so that just brought it about and made it more personable. And then it kind of followed that path going forward where they had these more, it just he made it happen. So I think it's a big thing, right?
Your question, I know people always say, like, do you take it serious enough? I always think that's so, I don't know. I don't think I think it's kind of a dumb question because you don't get to that stage if you're not taking it serious when the time's right. And I mean, look at who's currently for the last couple of weeks the dominant driver, Lando. Like that guy does Twitch streams and he has like fun games on his Quadrant channel, and like he's just living like a typical person his age. Yet when he gets in the car, he's very serious in races. So
yeah, it could be. Although, so if I'm arguing the flip side of that, there's what's it called? Full Swing. Maybe it's a similar story. Which was the golf version of Drive to Survive, right? And I'm not a golfer by any means. I don't know the industry, but I watched, I think, the first full season, and there was one of the guys there who he was kind of known as a bit of a goofball. He'd go drinking the night before, big tournaments and stuff, and his joke was just like, well, somebody has to be the 20th best golfer in the world, right? Like, and then there was actually the following episode where he actually tries to do really hard, like he actually buckles down, and he's much better. He's like top 5 or whatever, and it's like, oh, he was. It's almost like Raikkonen. Like Raikkonen was such a natural talent that, you almost got the feeling that maybe, again, he wasn't, it just came to him naturally, and therefore he didn't have to try extra hard. And it even seems like that showed through in some of his seasons where, like after he won the Drivers' Championship and a little bit, when things weren't when it wasn't his cup of tea, he was like, but when he was focused, when he had his head on, he was really in it. So, I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, for one, Red Bull driver, even though it's not two teams. They're separate. They're not the same team. Although I'm torn. I mean, I like McLaren and I'm a fan of theirs, but I honestly do think it was just Daniel and his team were like, let's go get the fastest lap at the last, like send you out with a bang. I don't think it was Red Bull saying get him to do it, but it does. The optics aren't great, but I'm sure it was Daniel probably wanted it.
I mean, I don't know that it's illegal per se, right? Even if it's not like, even if nobody at Red Bull officially told them to do it, if you're at RB and you're thinking, oh, I want to get a promotion to the big team too and work for the big team, I'm going to make sure that I make this call. I think 100% they knew what they were doing. Great for Daniel. He gets to go after a shitty race, right? Like not good race.
Yeah, nothing went right for him.
Yeah, nothing went right. And so he gets to go out with a bang, which is cool. But I don't know if you saw the comment where he said that he goes, if Verstappen wins the Drivers' Championship by 1 point, he goes, I'm going to get a pretty nice Christmas present. Max will send him something real good because that could be the 1 point that makes all the difference at the end of this year.
It could, because speaking of the championship, I know we've said for a while that we're pretty certain McLaren was going to get the manufacturers. I mean, after last week, like they'd have to now start to fall apart to get caught again. Like they're gapping out right now.
They totally yeah.
But I never thought Lando had a chance. But I did the math, and if he came first and Verstappen came second, the last 6 races, I think it is, the gap Verstappen has isn't that big at that point. So if he consistently finishes ahead and he can manage to get a couple places between, like it is doable.
Yeah, and it's like it all comes down like even like one DNF for either of them changes everything.
Oh yeah,
right, for the whole year. It's just like that changes absolutely everything. So could get spicy. I was very excited at Singapore to see them like next to each other on the on the first lap, and I thought, oh, this could get interesting, and it turned out to be not quite that interesting. The only Singapore GP to not have a safety car, and they keep joking it's been like 100 and some odd days since we've seen a safety car in F1. So unusual.
Lando kept the lead off the first lap for once too.
I know, for once. Yeah. Well, I mean, if he didn't, then oh my goodness, there'd be some big questions, I think. But he just killed it.
It just shows how good the McLaren is right now, because Verstappen had his usual lead over the field, but then Lando had like 20 seconds on him. It was crazy. And Piastri didn't have a good race at all with what was going wrong with him, and he still claws his way back up. So
yeah, it was possible. I'm curious about the future without Ricardo. Like we got Liam Lawson coming in, and I guess the real heat will be on him. Like I guess lots of excitement and stuff, but also it's again the whole point with the RB team is you're supposed to move up to the big leagues, right? So it's him versus Tsunoda, and you got to think if he like crazy outperforms Tsunoda for the last 6 races of the year here, he could be looking at a top seat. But if not, right? Could be a short-lived time with him. I went back and checked the stats from last year. I don't know how he finished in all the races. He did more races than I thought he did when he filled in for Ricardo when he was injured. But he walked away with 2 points at the end of the year. So again, I think he only had like 5 races or something. So
that's 2 more points than a couple drivers this year.
Yeah, that's true. And I had 2 more points actually when I checked, than a couple drivers from last year too. I think Logan Sargent was one of those. But
well, it's like Behrman. He's got more points than a lot of regulars just because of the 2 races he's done.
He does. On the Logan Sargent news side of things, it's not normally something we'd follow anymore, but I saw that apparently he's going to have a test for one of the IndyCar teams. I have to find out what team it was again. Meyershank Racing. Yeah, so we'll see if that turns into anything. Again, I know we probably crapped on Logan Sargent a lot, but I think F1 cars are a pretty wild beast, and anybody who can get anywhere close to that level is probably well qualified to race anywhere else in the world. But yeah, we'll see.
It's interesting to see sort of where he goes, because like some guys have gone to Indy and had great success. I mean, Grosjean's is in there doing really well.
Yeah.
But it's not, he didn't really have much success at F1 at all. And I don't even know what happened to Latifi, who he replaced. Like, I don't know where he went after his racing. So.
Oh, well, Latifi went to school. No joke.
Oh,
like
really?
He actually, I remember some press release saying he was going to, it wasn't Oxford, but it was something like that. And he was basically going to do like a business degree, et cetera. And I'm sure, they're all from moneyed families. So he's probably thinking, okay, enough racing now. This is going to be take on a financial career for the rest of his life or something. So
you're right. He's getting his MBA at the London Business School.
There you go. And you never know. You could see him running a Formula One team in the future just because you weren't a great racer. I mean, look at both Christian Horner and Helmut Wolf, I think, have both done a little racing. And there's actually a great burn with, have you seen, it's Christian Horner and Martin Brundle doing like a grid walk once. And he asks, how does it go? He basically asked something about how, are you, wouldn't you like to be here, but you're too old? Christian Horner makes a comment to Martin Brundle, says, but you're too old. And he says something back about how he's like, yeah, you wouldn't be here because you're not good enough or something. And it was like, whoa. It really could have called it out, which is a great claim.
But it's funny because you think, because he was in not that long, like Latifi is young, but he really isn't. Like, I think he's almost 30. So yeah, you're right. He'll probably race again once he's done something, like maybe some endurance stuff where you just go for a couple weekends here and there. But maybe he'll start a Canadian F1 team and they'll get in before Andretti does.
Come on, Aston Martin's the Canadian F1 team.
I guess, yeah.
Lawrence Stroll is just, maybe Magna will get involved. I don't know. They should Bombardier and the Canadian government will throw money behind it.
No.
Who knows?
I don't think I want that company to.
We can have we'll petition Mike to have a second race in Canada. That's what we need.
Yeah, even at Mosport or CTMP. I know it's not safe right now, but with the money they could fix the runoff areas.
Yeah, it's like half an hour from my house. So
I can't imagine the speeds a modern F1 car could get at that track in its current form.
Oh, it'd be crazy.
Ridiculous.
It'd be crazy. There's actually, if you look, there's some crazy stat around the speed of the one of the last prototype races. It was like they still run prototype cars there, but it was like one of the Audi hybrid diesel things, and it had like a average speed of above 300 kilometers an hour, something stupid like that, because you're basically never braking, right? So what's that, 186 miles an hour? So it's like that's your average speed. Pretty wild. So that may be an exaggeration in my head right now, but
anyway, back to F1. So we're kind of running out of time. So do we have anything to end on? Like, is there a prominent team that's self-destructing?
There sure is. Oh my goodness. Red Bull's the latest person to leave Red Bull here is Will Courtney, who was there. So he was Red Bull's head of strategy, and he's going to McLaren as their new sporting director. And to give you an idea of how much things are falling apart, he's been at Red Bull since Red Bull was Jaguar.
Oh wow!
So that's he's an OG, right? And he's
and he's not just leaving because my contract's up, I'm gonna take a new opportunity. He's signed for another 2 years, and it sounds like just gonna sit out until he can go race at Red Bull or at McLaren in 26.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is crazy, right? So I mean, there's I don't know, man. It might just be Christian Horner all sitting by himself in 2 years from now. But I mean, they've got some people.
Their engines for the 26 regulations are terrible, and they are suddenly Williams, because I mean they're taking a gamble there too, and they have no one who can do their aero and no one for their strategy now. So
yeah, I think it's a huge. They're making a major gamble with Ford, right? That's like no slack on Ford here. I don't mean to dump on them, but coming in out of the blue, like we saw again, Honda rejoining with that McLaren effort under when Alonso was there, and it was a disaster. And it took Honda years to kind of get back to where they needed to be, right? So it could be some rough years ahead. Maybe they'll pull something out of the bag and they'll have some tricks, that we don't know.
Toyota too, like even Audi, I don't expect them to come out of the gate flying. There's no expectations, but when you're Red Bull, you can't be in the same situation, even though they could be. I mean, was it Braun came out of what, Toyota's team? Or was it Honda's team?
Braun was Honda. Yeah.
They've given up because they couldn't do a solo team, and then they've started to turn around. But yeah, it's 26 is going to be a great year. I think. I mean, who knows who gets the regulations? But teams like Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren that have a good system now, and they'll use their those two engines that you would assume would be good. They could just come out flying, and everyone else could catch up.
They could. And actually, my idea, as you said, I do expect great things about it. Looking at how they ran all their years, the 24 hours of Le Mans stuff, I have I would. I'll put it this way: I wouldn't be surprised if Audi comes out as like a top team right off the bat. I mean, I don't think they have the drivers necessarily lined up right now, but I think that they'll be better than pretty much any other team. Has sort of, I don't think they're going to arrive and be in seventh. Like I would expect them to be like fourth or fifth in the first year. I really think Audi will. They just, I don't know why, they just strike me as they just do not mess around. And when you look at everything when they did with the 24 Hours of Le Mans stuff, they are, they're as serious as they get. And I think they're probably in it to win it. And I'm sure there's a lot of pride to stick it to Mercedes and all the rest of them too. There's some German bragging rights at stake here.
Yeah, I think it took them 2 years, I think, to win them all. Like I think their first year I think they podiumed still with the R8R, I think was their first one. But then like the R8 dominated and the R10 really dominated. And
sure did. Yeah.
And just
we'll see.
Toyota quit, made Porsche quit.
Everybody ran away crying. They're so good. Everyone leaves.
They rebranded it as Bentley one year.
They did. They were that confident, right? That's exceptional. So
yeah. All right. Well, this has gone on long, but it's been a good talk. So we will be back next week because we have a couple weeks till we race again, and we'll see who leaves Red Bull by then.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Take care, Mike.
All right. See you. All right. So we'll take a quick look at what's next. Well, usually it's like this week I did this and it's coming up, but this week I was in Detroit driving the kicks and we've already talked about it. That's just
true.
The efficient turnaround I did. But other than that, you got to stay home for a week, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, I also drove something, but it was a local event, and that review will be coming early next week. I can talk about it freely. It was the Ford Explorer. It was the 25, and it's updated pretty substantially in a lot of ways that I really appreciated as someone who wasn't a huge fan of the pre-facelift. So on that note, I will leave the rest for the review next week and our next episode of the podcast. But yeah, that was fun. And then you and I had a pair of very subtle vehicles this week.
Oh yeah, quiet.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yours did look subtle, but that's a discussion for later. But yeah, we were celebrating the end of an era, the end of the supercharged 5-liter V8 that adorned many Jaguars, Land Rovers, and Range Rovers over the years. The two Jags that we have, the F-Type and the F-Pace, are the last holdout of those engines. And as we will say in our review, and I won't get into it right now, but after this year, they're gone. I mean, the F-Type's fully gone, but the engine's gone. Yeah. So we've been making a lot of noise, probably angering lots of neighbors, but yeah, that's what these are always good at. That review and video will be coming down the road. And like you said, your Explorer next week. I mean, I could almost look out my window and see where you drove.
It's true.
Which is funny. You drove all the way here to drive that while I was in Detroit, but
yeah.
Next week.
I have a second car. This is the end of the second car month, but I have the 25 BMW M4 convertible as well.
Oh right, just that. Crazy convertible.
Yeah, and of course, so it rained for most of the week too, which made this especially interesting. But yeah, it has more power, which is the last thing I think the M4 needed. But yeah, I'll talk more about that on a future podcast as well.
Yeah. So the next week, we're both on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I am heading out to drive the Solterra, and you may think, why, that's not that new, but it's been hard to get our hands on one. I mean, every one they've been making has been sold, and they had to delay it first. So looking forward to it because we've driven the BZ4X. But
I was going to say, did you go to your nearest Toyota dealership? Because I'm sure you can find it.
Well, there are a few differences. So they're rated a horsepower different. No, but I'm curious because there is some things that's supposed to do that maybe the Toyota can do, but they're not marketing that way. Like a part of our drive is we're going off-roading. And knowing Subaru, like it's not going to be like, here's a gravel hill, go up it. So I'm curious to see what happens there.
That's good to know, because when I learned where you're going for the launch, I thought that was kind of funny because it's exactly where I drove the BZ4X 3 years ago.
And then you're off to drive a different electrified vehicle.
Yes, electrified in a smaller way. I am going to be driving the Kia Carnival Hybrid, which I'm really excited for. I'm genuinely, of course, I'm following into that journalist stereotype where I'm the person without kids who's like, yeah, minivans. But It looks good. The facelift makes it even more SUV-like, because I know people are terrified of the M word. Hybrid means that it solves one of my biggest issues with the car right off the bat, which is that the V6 was thirsty. So yeah, I'm very curious to see what it's like. And of course, being in San Diego probably isn't the worst.
Oh, right around this time last year, a couple of weeks later, we compared the Pacifica and the Carnival last year, and we said the Carnival had a big price advantage, but the Pacifica was just worth it. And one of the things was that engine. So now with the hybrid and better efficiency, it might now be worth it, because you get tons of features. I mean, it wasn't as refined, and maybe they've done some work there, but yeah, I look forward to hear what you say. And I'm also having a very brief stint before I head out to BC with the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing, my favorite car on market. At least it was 2 years ago. Let's see if it still is.
I'm looking forward to that, as well. So, dang, it'll be a busy week.
Yeah, and you're not driving anything next week. Oh, no, you are.
I am. I am in the Porsche Cayenne SE Hybrid. And I just want to say a fun little addition for that. I don't remember if we talked about it on a previous podcast, but Porsche Canada launched a lineup of hot sauces named after the Cayenne, because, I mean, it took this long. It's about time. And as far as I know, I will be getting one of the hot sauces when I pick up the car. So I'll be doing a different sort of review.
Shots of hot sauces as you drive.
Exactly.
So you're driving two hybrids, and I'm driving an EV and a snarling V8. So we kind of balance out as a carb, right? It's like everything balances.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Well, this has been a slightly longer episode, but we had lots to talk about. We'll be back next week, and we'll have lots to say. So this has been the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. We'll see you later.
So long, everybody.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.